All right. So welcome everyone this evening. Tonight we have Erik Roth, who is going to speak to us about fixed stars. Little history on Erik. Some of you know him quite well because this is his second time. He was actually our very first ever guest speaker, but you know, he's back for round two. We impressed him, I guess, or maybe he impressed us. I think it was both ways. Erik's been, about 13 years as a professional astrologer. He's a shamanic astrologer, but also now is alchemical.
Yeah, that's something that I'm putting in there because it helps actually better elucidate what I do.
Yes, yes. And he is an author. He wrote a wonderful book called The Sacred Hearth Within. It's all about Vesta. He is a teacher. He does mentorships. He does readings. You have a course, I think I just saw you announce, the Stellar
Yes.
Gateway course with Caitlin Castell,
Yes.
which you'll have to tell everybody about because that kind of goes along with what you're talking about here. Same kind of thing. He has a YouTube channel that is full of information. So if you want good information, definitely go to his YouTube. I will share your website because if you go to the website, you can get all the information. It's all there.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Erik and then I'm going to get quiet here. And do you want them to ask questions at the end, to just put them in the chat when they have a question? How do you want them to ask you questions?
Yeah, everyone's welcome to ask questions in the chat. And also, obviously, we will have more space for that at the end too, because there'll be some interactivity because I'm happy to answer questions about people desiring to know what their maybe a personal star and how it impacts their life. So I'm happy to share about that. So there can be some interest in that. Feel free to use the chat box, or at the end you can use the audio or visual as well to share your question with me.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys, I'm handing it over. It's all yours, Erik.
All right. Well, thank you. Yes. The fixed stars. This is an introduction. Now, there are some complex subjects that I'll bring in, but I'm not going to really get too detailed into that whole arena because this could turn into a multi-day presentation if you go into that road. But I'm going to show you all an introduction of what the fixed stars mean, how to kind of view them or experience them in your own life, and maybe kind of give you a little bit of your toe dipping into having your own personal experiences with the stars yourself. And we're going to look at not only the slideshow, but also look at a table with hundreds of stars that are listed on that table. And at the same time, we'll also look at what's going on in the night sky even right now. And I can point out some specific, prominent stars that we can connect with, and how does it connect with us astrologically as well? Because that's the big question. How does it interface with us as human beings and the signs and the planets and all of that? I'll reference some authors that you can check out as well. I've taught an entire not online, but an in-person course about the night sky and cosmology. And that's something I do locally as well. I was in Mount Shasta back in August and did an intro to the night sky while under the night sky. And while the Perseid meteor showers were going on, this was pretty fantastic to be at, the last point where your car can drive and have a flatter place to be with a group of people up there. So these are things that you also can do in your own time, in your own way, where you live, or if you have to drive a little ways to get out of the night sky, or find pockets of without the bright lights under the sky, which I've done just in regular neighborhoods. So these are ways to get familiar with the constellations, the movement of the planets, of the sun and the moon, and so forth. All right, so let's move on to some some other slides I have here. So the stars, they can play an important role in our natal charts and astrology in general. The stars can show up and primarily with what we call conjunctions with personal points. This would be especially like the sun, moon, the ascendant, or other angles, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and maybe some asteroids. And to some degree, like Saturn and Jupiter, although when you start getting into the outer planets beyond Saturn, it tends to get not quite as personal. Those are more like subgenerational planets. So, but there are other ways that the stars can come in besides conjunctions. Sometimes we could use oppositions or squares depending on what we're looking at in the relationship on the chart. But there are other concepts that ancient astrologers and astronomers used, around the time, even before the time that personal horoscopes were coming in 2,500 years ago. They were using things like concepts like parans and culminations, which I'm not going to talk too much about tonight, because again, that's a additional layer of complexity. But I'll put simply that a paran is simply like one object, for example, let's say at a star, rising with another one at a different point on the horizon. So like a year ago, great example, a year ago, Mars and Aldebaran were rising around the same time in the sky. And that was really pretty incredible that they were coming up around this at the same point there, or around the same point. And you can get that with other stars off the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun. These are things you notice with experience. So I'm not going to talk too much about like going into the definition, since we don't have all that much time. And then the other one called culminations, that's when a star reaches its it's not a zenith point, but it reaches kind of its maximum point on the top of its, from horizon to horizon. It's essentially culminating at that point. And Bernadette Brady, a great astrologer who writes a lot about the fixed stars, she's got quite a few books about them, and I would definitely refer you to those books. I don't know if there are audiobooks or ebook versions, but I have the printed book versions. So in addition, though, it's more than just necessarily just in your personal chart. You could have like a star near a seasonal point, like a solstice point, or where the sun would be at, say, summer solstice or spring equinox. That star would play a role in the definition or how that energy of that seasonal point is. And they're called fixed stars, and called that for thousands of years, because they're fixed in the sky. Obviously, the Earth is spinning, so they're moving from horizon to horizon. But the planets used to be called wandering stars, and that's essentially what planet means. It's a wandering star. So that the planets are actually moving, each night, and moving a little bit more, particularly when you're looking at, say Mars or Venus or Mercury. Those ones tend to move a lot. And then the moon and the sun tend to be luminaries, although technically those would be considered from the ancient definition as planets. So that's why they're called fixed stars. But over long periods of time, those stars do move. But that's a whole nother layer that we can maybe have a separate discussion or class down the road. But right now we'll call them just the stars or the fixed stars, and just make them interchangeable. Oh, yeah. All right. I just thought there was a question there, but thank you, Deborah, for putting my website there. Okay, so the role that the stars play in astrology, that they can act like special points in the stellar environment that the planets are traveling along. So they, when they conjunct, just as they would conjunct another planet in the sky, or maybe square it, and they conjunct a star, there's something there. There's something important that is being activated there. So, and if it happens that we have, say, a personal point, with that star, then that could be extra emphasized there in our own natal charts. But some other stars outside the zodiacal constellations, which I'm going to get into a little bit of definitions, because there's going to be needing a little bit of foundation here around this, because the stars, of course, you look up in the sky and there's thousands that we can see with the naked eye. I think technically it's somewhere under 10,000 that we can see, but if you include just like when you're looking at the Milky Way, there are millions of stars that are kind of all bottled in together, so they look like they're just one like cloudy formation along with the nebula. So other stars that are outside what we would consider the classic zodiac from ancient times, such as they bear the same name astronomically as the signs, such as Aquarius and Taurus and Leo. There's constellations that are above where those are and ones that are below, and sometimes they can be counted too as a personal star, or even playing an important role in our connection and our ability to navigate through that, because they have all the stars in the sky and the constellations represent mythologies. They represent human stories that are projected onto them, but stories that also relate to the journey of the planets through the sky as well. And so all of that is kind of weaved in, and then we throw in the gods and goddesses and all of that, and that's literally what we're looking at up there. And most of that comes from the Mesopotamian, Egyptian culture, and the European cultures that we connect with in the sky. But of course, there are other cultures that looked at the sky in different ways, such as the Hawaiians, the Polynesians, and other Native Americans that would look at the sky in different manner. So, for example, like there's a really prominent group of stars that we see in particularly the mid to late fall and through the winter time and early spring. That's called typically astronomically they call it the winter hexagon, but the Native American, particularly the Lakota and Dakota peoples, they would look at that as the sacred hoop of stars, and it really served a huge role in every year in their annual ceremonies. When the sun would go over that area in the late spring into summer period. So it's more visible in the winter time, less visible in the summer, but sky watchers would know that the sun would be going through there when they would watch the sky. They would observe it, and they would track all of that. So all of that mythology, all of that connection to our stories in the sky, they play a role in helping define what the individual stars and the constellations represent. But we can also look at the figures just in our current time and see what our relationship is to them, because we could say that there's new stories that could be emerging based on our current history that's going on right now. And when we look to the ancients, we look to the ancient definitions of the stars, and we look at astrologers that have looked at this and helped been able to really say bring in the knowledge and kind of filter it in so that you get the core essence of what the individual stars mean. Like I said, Bernadette Brady does a great job of this. And this is something that I've been working with for quite a number of years myself. So I'm going to introduce the zodiacal constellations, which, of course, professional astronomers call them by the same name as the signs. But in this class, what I'm going to be doing, or this presentation, so that we don't confuse those constellations with the same name as the seasonal signs, I'm going to be calling them by sort of what the figure is, not the zodiacal sign, but what the actual figure is, such as Aquarius being the water bearer, meaning a human figure pouring water onto the earth. So here's something we could look at and kind of give you a kind of a map, if you will, of how the signs and the planet and the constellations interact. So these are the 12 zodiacal constellations, and I'm happy to actually send the PDF of this of these slides to everyone if they want. They're welcome to access this. But to differentiate the signs and the constellations, we can start with the spring equinox point, such as 0 degrees Aries, and it's no longer in the Ram. It's actually currently in the Fish, but if we're just going by from 2,000 years ago or over 2,000 years ago, it would be the Ram. That's where the spring equinox or the March equinox point was. So we go to the Ram, the bull/cow, the twins, aka Gemini, the crab, which the Egyptians called the scarab, the lion, the priestess, the scales, the scorpion, the archer, which at one time, at some point, a centaur was projected onto that constellation. And that's why the kind of that transmission into Sagittarius became a centaur-like figure with a bow and arrow. Before that, it was just a human figure with a bow and arrow. And then it became a centaur. And then there's some additional stories around that have to do with the centaur Chiron, which we don't necessarily need to get into right now, but that's part of, there's some confusion with that particular constellation. But anyway, I digress too much here with that. Here's a question from Elizabeth. Which constellation would you associate with based on Western or Vedic significance? So the constellations, that's two different systems. Vedic astrology or sidereal deals with the sidereal zodiac, and Western astrology deals with the tropical zodiac. What I deal with is the tropical, because I work with the seasonal signs, the signs that are tied intimately to the essence with human beings. More the signs, you might say, come first before the stars, in part because we live on this planet, and so we're intimately involved with the changing of the seasons and the different partitions of the seasons as they go along. But the Vedic astrology, the sidereal zodiac, has its own meaning too, and it has a role to play there. So in what I do, and part of what I learned originally from Daniel Giamario and the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School was bringing in both the constellations and the signs. And especially after, like, if I do a reading for somebody, later on, I might bring in the fixed stars and put some additional emphasis on that. But it's a different system. So it's not quite comparing apples and oranges, but there is, you might arrive at some similar conclusions, but just using different words based on the system. So, but just to answer your question, it would be more Western. And so what we're looking at here in this map here is you're seeing the seasonal signs on the outside here, these glyphs, the astrological glyphs. And then you see just inside that ring are the constellations that generally overlap this sign the most. Now, there are some constellations that have two signs in them, and so we're kind of looking at that from that perspective. It's not a perfect wheel. There are some a little bit of differences there, but then you see the figures, the general figures of the actual zodiacal constellations here, and you can see that Sagittarius, this is a great constellation to actually observe. Currently at this time of year, you can see it before sunset or after sunset. You could see it as it's in the western sky there, as it's setting along with the star Antares. But that's all in the sign of Sagittarius. And so the reason it's different is because there's a process which I'll talk a little bit about to help set this up a little bit is called the precession of the equinox. And everyone, I'm sure, has heard of the age of Aquarius. Well, that age of Aquarius is related very, very strongly to the precession. The Earth is wobbling over a 26,000 year period. It completes that wobble. Now we're transitioning to this quote age of Aquarius, the so-called age of Aquarius, but we haven't, as far as the constellation is concerned, we haven't quite reached there. But one could say that we're kind of already getting into the vibrations or the frequencies of that from a esoteric or metaphysical and or spiritual level. All of that is already kind of in that process. And so over time, these constellations will go back. And so Sagittarius will be linked up in another 1,500 plus years, linked up with the Scales constellation. And so it's because of the precession, the sky is moving. If we were to live, many centuries or millennia, we would be able to see this. But it really is difficult to perceive in our relatively, cosmically speaking, short human lives. But this is the logo of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which is switched their name over a year ago to the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And they don't use this logo quite as much, although they do still use it. But it's a great tool to use just as a teaching tool to kind of give you a general idea of where the signs fall with the particular constellations. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the signs, the difference between the signs and the constellations. And we're going to get back to the fixed stars, but I kind of wanted to really, because I knew the question, I'm glad Elizabeth brought that up, because I had a feeling the questions around that would come up. So as I mentioned before, in Western astrology, what we call the kind of mainstream or typical Western astrology is based on the tropical or seasonal zodiac. I've been leaning more and more toward calling it what is temporal zodiac, meaning a zodiac in time. It's our place in time. And that was based on the research of Robert Powell. In fact, I would recommend that book to anyone wanting to learn some of the deeper level understanding of the difference between the zodiacs. It's called he did a thesis about the history of the zodiac, and the book itself is called History of the Zodiac, and he goes into the sidereal and into the tropical and or temporal zodiac. Okay, so the Earth is tilted. As we all know, the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees, and that's why we have a winter and a summer in both hemispheres. Of course, opposite, you're south of the equator, like right now, they just got into spring down there in, say, Argentina or, South Africa. Meanwhile, we're moving into fall here in the Northern Hemisphere. But the Earth is tilted at about 23.5 degrees. And that tilt is not as constant as we'd like to think. It actually moves from about 22 degrees to 24.5 degrees, roughly in that zone over many tens of thousands of years. And there's a whole set of other kinds of cycles that could be talked about around that. But I don't want to get too far into the weeds with that. Now, the sun's movement across the sky. So when we're going out there and we're seeing the sunshine and we're noticing that it moves over a certain pattern. Each year it follows the same track. And that track is called the ecliptic, or the plane of the solar system. That's the plane that all of the planets that are orbiting the sun are following. And from our perspective, that is exactly where the zodiacal constellations are located. Some are a little bit below the ecliptic and just barely overlap it. And some are a little bit higher. But that is the path of the sun, so the ecliptic. And I'm going to mention the ecliptic on various points as we get into this presentation. So the signs themselves have been essentially became tied to Earth's seasonal points, and meaning the points in time and direction, hence the word temporal, and had little to do with, ultimately little to do with the constellations. So uh, the ancient philosophers and mathematicians and astronomers, particularly in Egypt and ancient Greece and in Mesopotamia, they were working on various ways to bring the zodiac into an order. Like they were trying to figure out, how do you work with this all? And it was ultimately, currently, at least ultimately, credited to a person named Euctemon, who worked with another Greek named Meton. And it was originally devised to, because they noticed that over long periods of time, because people kept records of stars not being in the same place over the centuries on a certain day in the calendar, they decided that there was, obviously the Earth was going through some kind of a movement, or the stars were moving on some level. And so they needed to devise a greater calendar that was based on and it had the same names as the zodiacal constellations. And so this is where the 12 signs generally come from. And it was through the constellations that are rooted, like they have a lot of overlap as far as what they mean into the actual signs, but the signs themselves evolve, the constellations as well. And so we have sort of that semi-origin point, but again, this is just in the particular point in time, say in 2400, 2500 BCE. But the Mesopotamians had their own thing, and there was a lot of exchange of knowledge between the cultures over the centuries. And so, and Egypt had their own zodiac too. They had a thing called the decans or the decans, and they divided the sky in a totally different way, in 36 decans. Each decan was 10 degrees of the sky. And then when the Greeks came over, particularly during the Alexander the Great's conquering, they began to work with the Western version, the Ptolemaic version of the zodiac. Ptolemy being sort of that one who a lot of people associate with the, sort of the root material that we have today, as far as Western astrology is concerned. Okay, so I'm showing this so that you can get an idea of where the sun would be at the equinox and solstice points. And why those are important is that sometimes you can find that there are certain stars that are connected with that, and they play a role in the definition. So March equinox is currently with, as you can see here, there's a little diagram of a fish. It's right here. And you can see the water bearer, what astronomers still call Aquarius, but not to be confused with the sign of Aquarius. Although there is some of the constellation of Aquarius that is overlaps into the sign. So you can get some confusion into that, but that's where it is. And over a long period of time, over the centuries, the equinox point is coming from the left of this to the right. So it's moving toward that watery area here and moving toward the sort of the cosmic knowledge of this water bearer. The September equinox, opposite the March equinox, is currently still in what astronomers still call Virgo, or the Virgin Priestess. I just call the priestess for short, and this is close to her shoulder and head right now. But it's migrating again from left to right toward the tail of the Lion constellation, and will be there in just a few short centuries, astronomically speaking. And then we have the solstice points. The December solstice sits right now. This is one of the factors of our current age in which we live. This is the turning of the ages, and the solstices are currently lined up with the galactic center. So the December solstice is right here where the thickest part of the galaxy is, where the black hole is, right in here. And just above the tail of the scorpion and the arrow of the archer here. That's where this region is. And it, according to mathematician John Muse, it was centered with the solstice in 1998. But the sun's disk takes a long time to move over a long period of time when you're just going year by year by year. So it's going to be decades before it will move away from that position. But we're at the center. This is one of the markers that we're a center of the turning of the ages. There's also another thing with the Kali Yuga, with the calculations of that kind of a calendrical system by the Hindus, the Vedics, where we're moving into a whole new age by 2025 and 20 with a transition of 3 centuries before the next real age comes in. This is all kind of weaved into that whole thing. So and then we have this June solstice point here, which is the opposite of the galactic center, so the galactic edge or extreme. And you can see the hand of Orion reaching up. And in a way, it's holding the sun in its hand at the June solstice point. And so when a planet sits over here, it crosses into 0 degrees Cancer. Then it's literally sitting on top of the hand of Orion, or we can call the hand of the hunter, the high man. There's certainly a lot of mythology that is rooted into this particular part of the sky. And this is the center also of the sacred hoop of stars by the Lakota. And then I think we covered all 4 points. And we could look at these 4 points as the world angles, the ascendant, descendant, and the midheaven and home and roots. So you could look at them in that way as well. That those, if you were to find like, what is the rising sign of the ascendant of the Earth? Well, you look to the March equinox. And what is the midheaven of the Earth? Then you look at interesting enough, you look at the December solstice. And then the home and roots is this place, the June solstice. So this is what we're looking at right here. And it plays a really powerful role in where society is going. So this gives you a little bit of an understanding of, and I'm going to be talking about, some of the stars along the constellations, the zodiacal constellations here. So this, in 200 BCE, this is when it was really starting to transition, where the March equinox was transitioning away from the ram, aka Aries, to the fish, which astronomers still call Pisces. But we're here now, 2022, 2023. This is the presentation I gave a year ago, so it still has that 2022 number, but it moves just it takes 72 years to move 1 degree, and 26,000 to move all 360 degrees. But by 2600, it's roughly here. You can see it right on the edge of the fish and the water bearer. Like these stars right in here are all essentially the stars that represent the water droplets from the urn or the water vessel that is coming down from the water bearer. So it's kind of in that zone. It doesn't mean that that's when the age of Aquarius starts. It just means that that's when we get to that technical boundary. But again, we're already in transition there. So I feel like, particularly based on world events and what's been going on, that we're heading to that. We're already sort of on the outskirts of town, if you will, with that. I think what I'll do, because you'll have this slide, and we're not going to really go into this too much, but it just shows you that sometimes there are different stars that can mark the equinox and solstice point. And when there's one that's not too far from now, there's a star called Zavi Java, which is in the Priestess, in just under 200 years, that will mark the exact September equinox point. And then the official black hole will be tied into the December solstice, like the technical point, but we're already on the galactic equator. So we're there. It's just that's sort of the center of all of that. And when you're gauging in the center of these stars, you want to use a few degrees. And these few degrees would cover centuries of time. So it isn't that, oh, we're not there yet, but it's going to be quite a while before we get to that exact point. But eventually the star Antares, the heart of the Scorpion, in about 1400 years will become that December solstice point. And again, you'll have this slide for your own, curiosity, just to kind of look at that and to see if, maybe one of those stars pertains to your own chart as well. So we're going to get into personal stars here, and this is where we're going to more interactivity with each of you, or especially if you want to know some of your personal stars. I'm going to give a couple of examples in this presentation. One of mine, another one of another person, a famous astrologer that I chose as part of this presentation. So, any prominent star near the ecliptic, so meaning near, you can kind of use roughly about 10 degrees above, 10 degrees below in that zone, but it depends on the astrologer. And this is more of a guideline than an actual rule. And then the same thing with using 6 degrees along the ecliptic. So like if you have a star, if you have a rising sign of say 24 degrees Leo, and the star Spica is at 0 degrees Virgo, well, that falls right into that 6 degree zone of your ascendant. So Spica would become that personal star for you. But if it's just a hair off the 6 degrees, maybe closer to 7 degrees, there would probably still be some influence of that from an astrological perspective. So, especially if you identify with the star, if you really connect with it, then who am I to say that that star is not your personal star in that way, particularly if it's within say 6 to 8 degrees of your ascendant, or perhaps your moon, for example. But the ascendant one is important because it connects us to our emerging identity, so that there's this level of soul direction, if you will. The North Node and the Midheaven also play important roles in that too. So there's different points that connect to our future, but when it comes to the soul's identity, the ascendant plays a really, really prominent role in that. But then there's stars that are way off the ecliptic, like the star Sirius, the brightest star outside the sun in the night sky, which is starting to become more and more prominent in the late evening sky right now. And there is also stars such as Vega, or Rigel, or Altair, or Canopus. They can be used as well, but they may become less personal. However, for example, I'll just give an example for me. My ascendant descendant falls right on, as a Capricorn rising, right on the star Vega, but that's Vega's way up in the northern sky, way off the ecliptic. And then the Sirius, the same far below the ecliptic. I look at those as sort of general field of energy for my ascendant descendant, not the exact personal star, but I feel like that they play a role. They're just not necessarily like the most personally influential. Although I do work with those stars on a personal level. It's just, particularly, and on a professional level too, obviously, it's just all depends on how you connect with them as well. And so there's a form that I'm going to include when I send the PDF called The Stars and Where They Are, which shows the astrological degree as far as circa 2019. That's when the form was made to determine your personal stars. And again, we can look at some examples of that, and I can do some interpretations. And ultimately, though, it will take a personal experience and maybe multiple personal experiences with each of you wanting to develop a relationship with the sky and the stars. Because, you can read about them with, say, Bernadette Brady. Christopher Warnock wrote a great book about the fixed stars, and particularly the Bohemian stars. It's a group of 15 stars that are really were used a lot in alchemy and magic. in the Middle Ages and ancient times, which is there was a whole online course I did with Caitlin Castell about that. That's available now if you wanted to watch it. In fact, there's currently 2 complete courses about the zodiacal constellations and about the Bohemian stars on mystaralchemy.com, which is the website Caitlin and I work with, and then an upcoming one that we're launching in November, which is there's a free introduction on October 17th about that. But let me come back to the stars and the zodiac here. If you find a star off of the ecliptic, oh wow, it's off the ecliptic, so it doesn't count. Well, not necessarily. Like I mentioned with Sirius and Vega, they're way off the ecliptic, but I feel like they, particularly if they're really bright stars, that there's a role to play. Now, if you're getting into like a 5th magnitude star, which is really, really damn hard to see, and is way off the ecliptic, that may or may not be very, very personal. But the prominent ones definitely are. And looks like we have, yep, thank you, Deborah, for listing the website, mystaralchemy.com. So first I'm going to talk about, use me as an example, and show you, and then I'll show you a night sky picture, and I'm going to use a night sky software tonight as well. So here's my chart. Got my birth information all up in there. Here's my ascendant at 1423 Capricorn. Well, there is one relatively prominent star in the sort of the head and shoulder and arm of the Archer, and I've definitely had you might say a personal connection to this particular star called Nuki. And it's one of the very few stars in the sky that still retains a name from the ancient Mesopotamian peoples. Currently, right now, it's at 12 degrees Capricorn, or thereabouts. Could be 1201 right now, but it's in that zone right now. And so it's only about roughly 2.5 degrees away from my ascendant. So that would be a star that we can consider my personal star. And there isn't much, in fact, very, very little written about that particular star, Nuki, that I've found in various books and online. So when you don't find any definitions, then you can use your active imagination, you can use your relationship with the sky to come up with them. And for me, because of what the Archer represents, particularly in the ancient times, it connected us to sort of this area of like the Archer was pointing toward the future, it was pointing toward where we wanted to go. And it had certainly a resonance over 2,000 years ago with the sign of Sagittarius. So there is this sort of this connection to to go forth into the world and blaze new trails. Well, Nuki sits in a place where there's a lot of, that the arm is pulling back and there's a lot of tension there in the shoulders, maybe in the neck of the Archer and the arm. And so it's like that winding up of the energy is connected into my rising sign, and sort of a tension. And certainly when you combine that with Capricorn, which is, can be a really tense sign of when it comes to responsibility and taking care of business, then that kind of is weaved in there alchemically into the actual Capricorn sign there. Now, there are other things. I mean, when I look at rising signs, sometimes I look at Sabian symbols as well. That's something you can also look in. I would encourage you to look at other modalities that might kind of weave into the other forms of astrology, might kind of elucidate this. And you could do an almost, a longer reading just based on one's ascendant or moon sign, for example. So that's how I would interpret that. And what's cool about having this and knowing your birth time is, especially today's age, where you can download at least on PC, I think you could do it on Apple devices too. I think you have to pay for it on with a mobile device, such as the phone or the tablet. But it's coming up with the night sky software, and you can go back in time to your birth date and looked to see what stars were there at, at various times, during like, okay, what was happening at that one point? What stars were there that were rising with me? Well, here is, I think this, yeah, this is Nunki right here. It's circled. I've got it circled right there, and at 12 degrees Capricorn. So it was just like right at that point. This has got 9:50 a.m. So it was just rising just shortly after my birth. And there's another star here. It's connected to the arm and the arrow of the archer here, called Namal Sadera. And then there's Albada. There's right here. I've got it marked. I could use really any of these three stars, but Nuki sort of stands out for me. And you can, interesting enough, this star here, Albada, is in a great example of Paran, and even the part of the tail of the Scorpion constellation Sargus is also rising at the same time as these stars. It's a great example of what the ancients called Paran, like stars rising in Paran, or if there was a planet happened to be right here on the at the moment of rising, then that would also be in Paran. You could see my Venus-Mercury conjunction that I was born with. See them right here, 24 and 25 degrees, Sagittarius. And then where is Jupiter up here. Yeah, just barely off the screen there at the top. And this is, you can tune it to the birthplace. So our actual birth time is 9:45. I did this as an example of showing where, the moment Nunki rises just 5 minutes after I was born. So you can kind of get that. And I encourage you, if you really want to know more about the stars and study them and work with them, having Night Sky software can be really helpful. Okay, so let's look at another example. And this is the astrologer John Dee, that lived in the 16th century, primarily in England, although he traveled to mainland Europe on many occasions. I read his biography called The Queen's Conjurer, because he was the court astrologer of the Queen at that time, and Queen Elizabeth. And he, helped her understand a lot of mysteries, and she was really into esoteric knowledge. But there was another thing that he was famous for, and it was something called the Book of Enoch, that he, with another, with a psychic medium, he helped channel and working with the angels, like an angelic language. So he was really like this trailblazer in what he did. He did normal astrology stuff. He gave readings to people and helped them with their health, and did a lot of work in that regard, made predictions and projections and other things like that. But he loved knowledge. He had like a ton of books that he would always travel with at times. It's funny, some of the stories about him, where he's got this large cart draped with like all these books and tied down. He's like, I got to have my books with me. So wherever he goes, during the this emerging Renaissance period of Europe here. And you can see that he has a Sagittarius rising here. And this is interesting because I list Antares here as his rising star, or as his personal star. Well, you can even see that his North Node's Sagittarius too. And when I look at those two, particularly with the Aquarius moon, this guy was, as far as knowledge and his pursuits of that knowledge and alchemy and downloading an angelic language. I mean, this guy was way off and into the other realms, going in both into the deeper realm and up into the celestial realm too. So he was trying to get together, and seeking that ultimate truth. And so here we have the star Antares being strongly associated with his rising sign at the time that he was born. Today, Antares sits at 10 degrees Sagittarius. If you look at, where do I have my no, it's off the screen a little bit here, but I'll show it maybe, yes, right here. So Antares is here. This is 10 degrees Sagittarius. This is 0 degrees Capricorn. So this star is about 15 degrees Scorpio. So we get to that 270-degree mark of the circle. You get to Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn first. But this star was not this far in. It was up in closer up in here, in this area, 500 years ago. So when John Dee was born, Antares marked his personal star. So, okay, question from Elizabeth J. Once we know our degrees of ascendant, how can we determine our personal star? So that's a great question. So this is where that document that I'm going to show today that has all the major stars along the various zodiacal constellations that you can look at yourself and ask, and I can show. I'll be sharing that the screen of that chart with you, that table, and you'll have it in your possession as well after this is over. So that's how you can determine your personal star, and then you can look in and do research. Like there's a free constellations of words website. It's got a lot of ads on it, but you can still get enough free information, and it goes into all these, what the various stars mean and the various zodiacal constellations. That would be a great reference if you're not wanting to get a book, but certainly other astrologers might share information online like I do at times. You can get some additional insights that way too. So that's how first you would look at the table, and then you could look at the definitions of what that is online, and or by ordering some books or ebooks to help you out. Okay, so let's go back to the here. So you can see Antares way off here, but that's 10 degrees, and my Jupiter. If I were to point to a star that has a prominent role with my natal Jupiter position, it would be Antares. And at the time I was born, it was not quite 10 degrees. It was about 9.5 degrees Sagittarius, so I wasn't quite there. The sun falls just a little bit outside that, but still kind of in that zone. So you can see a lot of the Scorpion constellation falls in all of my Sagittarius planets there. And then the Archer constellation where my ascendant is. But for John Dee, it's a little bit different because he was born 500 years earlier. So here is just about 20 minutes after birth, the star Antares rose. This is taken from England. Now, because of the Earth is a sphere, and you get a different latitude, you can have like not be able to see the constellations in the same way at that latitude, perhaps, as if we were in, say, Mexico City, and you were born on that year. Then you would be getting a little bit of a different kind of a thing there with the personal stars. But needless to say, I increased the time until a person watching this video can see. And you can see Mars up here in the head and the claws of the Scorpion right here, and the Akrab, Teshuba, and the star Fang, all in that. Teshuba is the head, Akrab and Fang are the claws. Now, at one time, the claws of this constellation extended to the scales in ancient Egypt and in ancient Mesopotamia at one time, many thousands of years ago. But then later, it got separated, and it formed its own constellation. I don't know the exact point. Sometimes you go far enough back, and you may not get to the exact century necessarily of when the constellations were developed. Like a lot of these zodiacal constellations have been around since before writing was sort of quote invented. So these constellations have been around a great deal longer than, at least we've been calling them constellations, long before writing came around. perhaps even civilizations. Who knows really how long, unless we had records to prove it. I mean, there's one of the most ancient temples that exist on this planet that we've uncovered in Eastern Turkey is about 11,000 years old, and it has depictions of constellations on them, in that there's a connection to the sky. So the sky has been playing a really powerful role in humanity since human beings have been humaning across the globe. Okay, so this is John Dee's, and I bring up Antares because the meaning of Antares is this is the heart of the Scorpion. It's a really powerful a star that has to do to some degree with death, rebirth, but more about the depth and the processing of toxins and working with things that don't belong within us, that are you might say alchemized or purged out as well. This is in Native American times, they looked at Antares, certain tribes, I think it was the Pawnee, there may have been other groups, they looked at Antares as the resting place for the soul on its way into the afterlife. It was like the last stop for the soul. So it was like that last point, then it goes off into the afterlife. And so when we look at those things, we can also come up and connect with how other, so they had a lot of judgment, other definitions. They had a lot of judgment particularly in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance around various stars, whether they were evil stars or good stars, malefic stars, like with the planets. But it's because they would sometimes pretend omens, or they would be some kind of a quote evil event or some kind of disaster that would happen when that star connected with, say, Mars or Saturn, for example. I mean, having Mars and Antares within 10 degrees of here would not necessarily be, from the more ancient definition, would not necessarily be a beneficial thing for a human being. But John Dee had an incredible, he had an incredible life, and he rose and had a lot of accomplishments and did some incredible things, particularly on a spiritual, metaphysical level. And, he helped bring astrology into that Renaissance period on the backs of others. Now, there was a period right after that where astrology kind of went into kind of a dark age, if you will, the 18th and 19th centuries, but still people were curious about it, still kind of kept alive. And some of these astrologers that were around at that time, some of their writings continued to be read, and sometimes in secret. And for like Antares is as a Scorpion, and the Scorpion constellation is something that Scorpion is wrapped around the Milky Way galaxy. It's the protector of this great golden gate where souls go to the galactic center to be, go out to their next life. And so there's something weaved in there with John Dee and his, with this particular constellation, and Antares being a really prominent star. So, and then the Mars here, that means that he tapped into the deeper level of what it meant to be on a soul on this planet, and to try to discover and uncover the truth from the mysteries of life itself. So I think that Antares really helped him come into his work and his role in the world, his identity in the world, in a really, really powerful way. So this is just some of what you can subscribe to a chart and help a person, and maybe connect with just your own personal life, or if you're wanting to connect with friends, or maybe do readings, maybe working with the chart. Again, this is just an introduction, giving you some basic examples of that. And it takes a long time to learn about the stars and to know their movement in the heavens. But, if you're really curious about it, I certainly can mentor, both in person, and I'm hoping to actually come out there to Ohio for the eclipse that Deborah's with her group is hosting. And nothing's for certain right now, right? I've certainly been going through some some big changes in my own life that so I'm optimistic. I'd love to go out there and experience that. I saw the eclipse in 2017 in Oregon, and it just is like words can't even really truly describe what it's like to see a total solar eclipse if you haven't seen one. And for those that have, you understand what I'm talking about. It goes beyond the the intellect. Like astronomers like to do all the measurements and describe it on a scientific manner, but there's this other layer that is even much larger, and where the true wisdom and knowledge comes in, from the cosmos, that goes and from Mother Earth as well. So all right, so let's talk about personal stars for everyone. And I've got a PDF, and I'm happy to answer questions. And anybody that wants to know more, I'm happy to pick out some things on here to that are aligned with maybe your ascendant, or if you don't know your ascendant, we can look at maybe where your moon or sun are, or perhaps your Venus or Mercury, if you want. Whatever it might be, I'm happy to connect with this. And yeah, so I'm open to questions right now. You can unmute yourself to ask. You can chat, or share on a video. Yes, Elizabeth.
What would I'm trying to read this chart. What would like a Libra ascendant be, or what other information would you need to find that?
What degrees is your Libra ascendant?
I'm at 15 degrees, and the other number is 34.
Oh, 15 degrees, 34 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you would look at is the longitude on this chart. Longitude has all the degrees and the signs. So for example, this star called Deneb Katos in Satis constellation is at 2 degrees, 51 minutes Aries, AR for Aries. Now, don't worry about the latitude. These are the ones that are sort of relatively either on the ecliptic or relatively close to the ecliptic. So that's why they're all listed here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down the list till we find Libra. Li is Libra. So there's Virgo at VI right in here in the middle, and then here we have some Libra ones. We have some, and Libra, if we go back to, let me share this particular part, you can see the sign of Libra is with the priestess constellation. So you can reference that as far as the, move that a little bit. You can reference that as well on this wheel, but then come to here and just try to go, because it's in numerical order. So first by sign, then by degree. And then we've got one here, Algorab, which is in Corvus. That's a little far. So you can also use this other star, which is a lot more prominent, Parima. And Parima is in, I think, let me look at this. I want to give you a visual on this. So you can see what I'm talking about here. There we go. So actually it's not far where the eclipse is going to take place. The eclipse takes place at 21 degrees Libra. And Parima, so the eclipse is going to be closer to Spica, but Parima is right here. So it's right around the shoulder and sort of the upper part of the shaft of grain that the priestess is holding. Let's give you a better visual of this. So she's, part of her upper arm, at least some draw it differently, but this is just the program and how it's drawing it. You can see she's holding that wheat, but there's a lot of pictures that have the wheat, like the stalk of wheat, all the way up in here. So Parima plays a strong role with Spica when it comes to Mother Earth, when it comes to her harvest. and having sort of that strength of being holding on to that shaft of wheat and sort of the cluster of wheat stalks that she's holding in her hand. And there's a lot of connections with the sign of Virgo, but since it's connected to Libra, this has to do with relationship to the earth. So your relationship to the sacred earth, to the sacredness of the earth, and being able to hold on to what you need to with your own self, your own personal self and sovereignty in that way. And yeah, Libra is about conscious equal relationships, but when it comes to the stars here, there's a greater relationship with Mother Earth with regards to that. So that's how I would do that interpretation there. And again, looking at this, Parima is right here, and Parima is 10 degrees, 24 as of 2019. And again, it takes 72 years to move for a star to move 1 degree in the zodiac. So by that point, everybody will be in the next lifetime, perhaps, or another star system, wherever that might be. But yeah, that would be the star I would use. But you could use, like, there's one here in the Boots constellation, one here in Corvus, which is the crow. The Boots is a charioteer that you could use if you wanted to, and to try to look up some information. But really, the one I would, as an astrologer, that I would say have greater prominence is this one. But you wouldn't want to necessarily discount the Matrix as well, because it's very, very close. She's up here at the other hand and the other arm. So, if you wanted to combine that, it's just like being able to, utilizing both of your arms and your hands when you are really connecting with Mother Earth, like really kind of getting into the sacredness of what Earth represents, what Gaia represents. And some astrologers, if they were to assign a sign to Mother Earth, that they would say that Virgo best represents Earth. Although me personally, I like kind of a blend of Virgo and Cancer energy, with shades of other signs in there. But those two tend to come out more prominently with that. But that's how I would interpret that for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And again, everyone will have that table that I shared here. And this is the main table, and then it really gives you a little more definition here. For example, we get to where is Parima here? Parima, yes. They say waist of the Virgin Priestess, but again, it's still connected into that priestess energy. I never really looked at it as part of the waist. I always looked at it as part of the arm. But again, she's the one who Kaylin created this, so you could. It's not to say that I'm right and she's wrong, or she's right and I'm wrong. You would certainly connect into yourself. And we could see Venda Matrix, we could see Parima in the greater definitions here. Anyone else have a question about personal stars? Shannon, yes.
Yeah, do me.
Good to hear your voice again.
Thanks. Yeah, good to see your face and hear your voice too.
Yeah. So what
do you think? Like the ascendant or Venus?
The ascendant or Venus? So can you remind me again your ascendant?
Yep, it's Pisces.
Oh yes. What degrees?
22 degrees.
22 degrees Pisces?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at that. What we've got here is some stars that are off the ecliptic, such as the one Pegasus, which is the wing of the horse, which you could use. When it comes to the Pisces constellation, not Pisces constellation, but I think I went too far there. Here we go. So we can see here, this is 0 degrees Aries. And you can see there really isn't, there's some stars if none of these have an official name. So like if I were to use one, it would probably be like this one or that one, but they don't have an official name. And so you say, oh, I've one of the, like the head of the fish constellation you could use, or Merkab, which is right here, which is one that you could use. Again, this is part of the wing of you could see the wing of Pegasus. So it's not too far off the ecliptic. So you could use that as one of your personal stars of your ascendant. And how I would interpret this is we could see that both. I mean, in fact, these fish, I mean, this is one of the mythologies. The fish are jumping out of the cosmic water. Although this fish is more in line with the ecliptic and more in line with the middle world. But they're both like trying to elevate themselves outside the water. And of course, Pegasus is flying. And so, I mean, it looks upside down right here because that's just where it is at this moment on the screen. But you can say that this, for you, Shannon, that your ascendant represents something about taking flight, and weaved in with Pisces, becoming a helper healer in this world, becoming, really raising your heart to a higher vibration, particularly on a celestial level. That's how I would interpret the combination of these particular stars, and that you're kind of coming out of the sort of the murkiness of the waters of the middle world and trying to elevate yourself beyond that, but still trying to work with the middle world on some way, bringing the celestial realm into the middle world. So that's how I would interpret that there.
Awesome. And when you say off the ecliptic, are you talking about, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, the ecliptic is this orange line. This is the path of the sun. Okay. And that's where all the planets follow, and you can see the zodiacal constellations are all connected to. Now, there's something about the tail of Cetus that's another layer we can work with, as to with the sort of the celestial waters. But the ecliptic is this path, and it's a really important line. Now, you can't see the line from, it's not like something visible. You can know where the line is based on where the sun is and where the planets are. And when you go out there, either every night or every week, to go out and look at the sky and see where Venus is or where Jupiter is. Like Jupiter right now is becoming more and more prominent with Saturn. So when you see Saturn and Jupiter in the sky, that's where the ecliptic is. Mars is not visible right now. Venus is visible in the early morning sky. So you could use in the evening sky, you could use Saturn and Jupiter as ways to kind of trace along the line, particularly after sunset. If you know where the sunset was, you can trace the line. And if you're in dark enough skies, like this constellation of the fish is very faint, so you definitely want to be outside the city to see it. Now, you'll definitely be able to see the Great Square of Pegasus. That is a relatively easy one to see in, say, with the lights are not too dark, the light pollution isn't too much. Say you're in the suburbs, you could see it, or in a kind of a darker area where maybe a darker park or something nearby, you could see it. But right now, this part of the sky, let's see. Right now, this comes up late in the evening, but it's going to become more and more prominent as the fall continues on. So Jupiter will reach its opposition here in the coming weeks, and that when that happens, it'll be like Pegasus and the fish will be rising after that, or sorry, before that. So yeah, so does that explain the ecliptic and what's going on there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I encourage everyone to get familiar with the sky if you're curious about it. You don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time. Just it's sort of like the frequency of it, meaning like either daily if you're able to, or weekly, where you can look at maybe the same area of, like, say if you have a little bit of a darker area in your backyard, or maybe you go to the same place like a mile or two away, and you can connect with that same part of the sky. If it's not cloudy, of course, then you can start to connect into that sky more and more. Like this is something that I'm going to be placing greater and greater attention on in my practice, in my astrology practice, not this section of the sky, but the sky in general, and being able to convey and share about that to get more people, hopefully to get more people interested in connecting with the sky themselves. Okay, so Kathy, okay, your mic's not working. Sorry to hear that. So she's asking if you have time, can you check out her personal star is ascendant 4 degrees Scorpio. Absolutely. Let's take a look at that. So 4 degrees Scorpio would be, okay. So let's see here. We've got one in the Boots constellation. We have, the Priestess constellation, Cambalia. That is that's actually a really, really powerful star. I haven't studied it as much. Because it's 4 degrees. Okay, so it's only 3 degrees away. So let's take a look at that. And that's where, like right now, it's not visible. Where's Cambalia? There is Cambalia. So that you can see that the art that drew this, these programs don't necessarily have the most, like artistically speaking, the most accurate of where specifically, how the figure is and what the figure was like originally viewed as back thousands of years ago. So Cambalia was the foot. This is the star right here of the Priestess. So this has to do with solidity and has a very, very deep, since it's the foot in the earth, of course, in a general way, if you want to feel solid on the planet, you can either walk on the earth or not just necessarily in a building, but like actually on the dirt or the grass or on rocks. You are, if you can do it barefoot to feel that earth within you, that's kind of what Cambalia represents there. And since it's the Priestess, it's deeply connected with the sacredness of that earth. So it's the solidity, the control of that solidity, meaning your own solidness and the rootedness into the earth itself. And Scorpio definitely wants that sort of that control of its emotional, physical domains on a personal level. And it's tied to life force energy. So it's really something really, really strong and deeply rooted. So it's like you are learning in this lifetime as you're ascendant in Scorpio here to really get rooted into that earth and to be sort of that control that emotional, physical domain. Not to say that you're not allowed to like share and be vulnerable. It just means that there's a sort of a training ground, initiation for you in this lifetime to kind of get deeper into that space for yourself, Kathy. So that's how I would connect that star into your life, Cambalia. And it has there's another layer of Cambalia because Kaylin, I think she wrote an article about it at one time. It's kind of piquing my interest to read that article and find out more about that. And I don't know if there's much written about that star. There's another book a couple of books I would recommend just as like star definitions, not just Bernadette Brady, who goes over more of the prominent stars, but one called Star Names, and then the other one, Star Lore. Those two books are great books, great resources, reference guides to many of the stars that I'm talking about, and much, much more. Hundreds of stars are in that, and not just the zodiacal constellations, but the ones outside the zodiacal constellations, like Bootis, Arcturus, and some of these other stars in that constellation, or Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Perseus, and the star Algol, which has a really, really powerful connection to Medusa and the head of Medusa. And like if you've got a star that has a connection to that particular, it's one of the Bohemian stars. If you have a star connected to that, that's a very, very powerful. They used to, in ancient times, they used to look at that as an evil star because of their projection of Medusa as something evil. But it has a greater psychological impact with the and historical impact with the stealing and or the taking, the capturing of the power of the feminine and stealing it for the masculine, you know, to support and to propagate the mythologies of the patriarchal stories of the gods and goddesses. Okay, so oh, there we go. Yeah, walking barefoot outside, favorite thing to do. Thank you, Kathy. That's beautiful. That's perfect. Okay, any other okay. You're welcome, Kathy. Okay, so Lenita, what would it be possible to check 5 degrees Taurus? All right, so yes, we can check that. 5 degrees Taurus, and that's in the Ram constellation. Okay, yeah, that's the Ram is roughly on the ecliptic, and that's the star Sheraton, and that's one of the horns of the Ram. And so let me show you a visual of that and back up. Let's see here. There we go. Let's give a better look at this. So here's Sheraton. And again, the graphical depiction here doesn't really do it as much of a justice. This constellation is more than just a ram. For a long time, they used to look at it as like something that tilled the earth, a plow, something that was more rooted, had more earthy, connected to the like the ability to connect with to farm, to plant the seeds. Is sort of that starting place where you're about to create the rows of land so you can throw down the seeds and cover it up with earth and put the water in there. That's sort of what this is kind of the part of that head of that plow, which can be likened to a ram in that way. When the in ancient times, when the patriarchal people started to get into power, you saw a lot of symbolism of the ram in Egypt. Well, that's in part because of that was where the equinox point was around. It was around this constellation. So Sheridan represents a certain level of like earth power and sort of that creation of the wedge inside life, like spearheading and intention and initiation in your life. So Taurus by itself isn't really necessarily initiator unless it's seeking out the pleasures of life, unless it's seeking out what feels good in the world. So this could be shared and creates the space to initiate more energy to what feels good. So you're learning, Linnea, to get to more about what feels good in your life and to actually create space for that, to create space, particularly with the earth, and to kind of put yourself into that space so that you feel into that earth. Now, of course, Taurus definitely has a connection with pleasures, comforts, and beauty. So that's weaved into the Taurus language, but this is sort of more of the deeper level of what Taurus is involved in, and particularly with Sheraton. Now we can see here that there could even be a part of the eye of the ram is in here too, not just the horn, but the head of the ram. So the engaging in the senses and your perceptions are going to be playing a role in that personal star for you. So there you go. And then there's looks like another one. Marina, you're welcome, Lenita. And if you have, okay, Marina's asking if you have time, 24 degrees Sagittarius. I think it's Ophiuchus, and we could be wrong. So yeah, Ophiuchus, not one of the 12 zodiacal constellations. That's a whole nother topic to talk about. But Ophiuchus does have a powerful role when it comes to the stars and the constellations. And let's move the sky and get that energy going here with this. So it's partly Ophiuchus and it's partly the tail of the scorpion. So it all depends on what you connect with. And so let's take a look at 25 Sag. That happens to be where my Venus position is. So I'm familiar with some of the stars in that area. Let's see here. Oh, Capricorn. Oops. Okay, there we go. Yes. So Aquilius, Scorpion. We can also see Rasselhag. Oh, yes. This is that's only less than 3 degrees away. At the time that you were born, it would have been a bit earlier. Like when I'm giving off these stars, they would have been a little bit earlier in the degree, not too much, roughly around a half a degree or less usually, or sometimes more depending on our age. Like if you're over about 72 years old or more, then it would be about a degree. But for most others, it'll be less than a degree. But if you're over 72, then it'll be a little bit more than a degree. But again, a degree, it's not very much. So, but for you, let's see, what do we have here? Catherine here. Oh wait, Scorpio. I was thinking of Sagittarius. All right. So it's not those constellations. Let's look here, Scorpio. Okay. I got Centaurus, but it's also in it doesn't show it here. Oh, okay. I'm getting 2 different ones. That's where I was. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, let's do this one at a time. Marina, you got the 24 Sag. Let's go back to that. So 24 Sag, we said Rasselhag, and the tail of the scorpion, which is Lisath and Shaula, as well as Aquilius. So grouped together, it's just the edge of the tail and the stinger of the scorpion. And that's powerful. Like both of these constellations are really, really powerful shamanic medicine stars. Rasselhag being the star that has to do with the snake handler of Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus and Rasselhag being connected into the magic of the snake medicine itself. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's a story about Rasselhag that has to do with Asclepius and his discovery of the sort of the medicine that can resurrect life, because the king had thrown him into prison because he refused to and he didn't know how to resurrect people. So he threw him in prison in order to, get him to, sort of fess up to the secret, because he thought he was lying. Well, there was this snake medicine that came in, and he Ophiuchus was, I'm sorry, Asclepius was not happy, and so he killed this snake that came into his cell. And then another snake came in, and Rasselhag felt, not Rasselhag, but Asclepius felt bad, and because they ended up having a dialogue, if you will, a mythological dialogue. And so that snake gave him the medicine that he needed in order to resurrect the sort of the life partner of that other snake. And so he found the secret of life eternal, if you will. And so it just is a greater lesson for, like, particularly on the soul's immortality. And so that snake bearer of Ophiuchus contains that, and the star Rasselhag in particular, which, if we were to look at this, is the head of Ophiuchus. This is the mind. This is sort of this, might even call it the psychic center, whatever you want to call it. It's connected into that space as a deeper connection with the celestial realm. And since it's handling the snake, really powerful medicine there for your rising sign there, Marina. But the tail of the scorpion also plays a role in helping to transmute toxins into medicine or an elixir. That's what that represents there. So you've got like really powerful shamanic medicine between these stars, and you can use both. You don't have to like only choose one, so you're not limited in that way. So from a shamanic perspective, this is a really powerful part of the sky, because this is the thick band of the Milky Way, and the stinger and the tail of the scorpion is wrapped around the Milky Way. So the scorpion in ancient mythology, in some stories, became the guardian of the Milky Way, the guardian of the tree of life, or the world tree, if you will. It's wrapped up into that, literally wrapped up into that space. So you could draw in from that and look up some other, insights with other authors, and how they viewed those stars of Rasselhag and the stars in and around the tail and stinger of the scorpion.
Thank
So
you
let's
so much,
look at.
Eric.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Here we go. That's Marina. So then we go to 26 Scorpio. And what I want to do is, first I want to share like what is 26 Scorpio, so we can see the constellation Taurus. We can't see that from our, barely the top of it, or in a certain time of year we can see it. Like this time of year, you may be able, in perfectly clear skies in the southern horizon, you can see part of Centaurus, but for most, it's not really visible unless you go down to like southern Arizona, parts of southern Texas, into Mexico, or parts of Florida, and south of there, Hawaii. Then you can see Centaurus. But for most of us, we can't. So we can look at at least maybe on this call and where we are today. So I would look to, let's go back to this. So instead of Centaurus, I would look at the Scales constellation, which she's got some couple of stars there, but not all of the stars. So let's look at them here. So where 26 Scorpio is right in this area of the sky. And there are some stars that represent the scales here. Now, it's not drawn all that perfectly in this, because technically Zubin el-Shamali and Zubin el-Janubi, these two stars, do represent the scales. And Zubin el-Arakbi is part of that, Brachium as well. So I would share, like, let's see, this one would be definitely qualify. It's right in that zone of where your rising sign is, Zubin el-Arakbi. It's not listed on that, doesn't have all the stars on there, but it's part of this, the Zubin stars. These are all, a lot of these stars have Arabic names. So it's part of that, represents part of the scales. And it plays a role in the mythology of ancient Egyptian mythology around when a soul dies, that they weigh the soul's heart against the weight of a feather. And if it's the same or less than the feather, then they're allowed to kind of proceed into the next celestial realm, if you will. If it weighs more than the feather, then they have to go back, or they go back to sort of the underworld to go and rebirth, if you will. So that's what that story revolves around. But it could also revolve around, you as a human being, and how you might judge yourself or judge others in your life. There's definitely a connection with that, and also it's maybe even to some degree, and on a more with a more matured level, you being able to be more to weigh things yourself, in when it comes to, say, like a mediator would do, or a counselor would do, in parties that don't see eye to eye, and being able to do it from even your perspective around having more objectivity, if you will, with another human being, and being able to see your own projections. So there's something about that can come in with these stars, and then Zubin el Akarabi and Brachium play important roles in that. But not until we get to that, this is sort of that area when you get to 240 degrees, which is 0 degrees Sagittarius, you're right kind of on the edge of that. So you've got a little bit of this energy with the claws and head of the scorpion. But for right now, I would just share that this would be the sort of the main star. Now there is some energy of the snake of Ophiuchus that's in here, just a little bit of that. The more prominent one is this star. So that's how I would share that there. So that would be Catherine's definition, and you have Sun, Stellium, and Libra. Oh, okay, yeah. So there's a lot there in the priestess, as well as you got here then, and the scales as well. So you got both constellations prominently in your chart. And so, yeah, if there's no other ones, I just want to comment that you can use this it doesn't have all the stars that are listed here, but you could use this as a general reference. And then if you're looking to look for more, the other books that I referenced, Star Names. In fact, I can stop sharing my screen and give you an image of this and what that looks like here. That's the book I'm talking about there, their lore and their meaning. And then here's Bernadette Brady's book of fixed stars. This is a great one. And then she's got one that has to do with planet and star combinations. I think that's the subtitle or the title of the book. Yeah, called Star and Planet Combinations. And then the last one that I would recommend. Now there are many other books, but these three right off the top: Star Lore, Myths, Legends, and Facts. And both of these books, the Star Names and Star Lore, were written many decades ago, like at the beginning of the 20th century. So there's a lot of definitions that are older in there, but they really reference a lot of the older texts from ancient Greece, or maybe other interpreters of that in like the 17th, 18th, 19th century, and that kind of thing. So you can see some of that and the definitions there. But of course, the first knowledge that we get is really when we are under the sky, and we're connecting into that. And we can think of these books, and the knowledge here today can be part of the foundation to become curious and to get out and learn on your own and connect with it yourself. But that's one of my loves, is being able to get people connected with the stars and the planets, and on a kinesthetic level, meaning you're having an experience with it with your senses, but you're also maybe doing ceremony, because some stars, it's one of the great things about the fixed stars. You can work with them also magically too, if you wanted to create an altar, or, maybe do a particular ceremony at the solstice or the equinox, where maybe there's a particular star. Like the ancient peoples did this all the time. Like the Mayans, for example, worked with Pleiades. And right now, Pleiades is at 29 Taurus and 0 degrees Gemini. Like that grouping of stars is right on the boundary of that. And a lot of temples were built connected to the Pleiades, whether when the sun was with it at the zenith point, or whether at the opposite end, where Pleiades was at zenith and the sun was on the at the IC, the Homan roots. So there's one of the temples, I can't remember which name, but it's got this snake that's built into it, and it lights up during equinox. But the snake's tail at one time was aligned with the snake. Right now, it only lines up in May and November, and the tail becomes the rattle of the snake that's built into the pyramid of the ziggurat. So the stars, as above, so below. We human beings, we are That's one of our greatest strengths, is our ingenuity and our ability to use our active imagination to work with things that are outside the realm of, just the hard reality of life. We can connect. There's no limit to what we can connect with, and so the stars represent part of that infinity that we are part of. All right, I think we've covered quite a lot here. Thank you, Deborah. Yep. Yeah, so, and feel free. Of course, I'm an astrologer. I do readings, I do classes. You gave the website, and mystaralchemy.com. And on that website, it's like right there of the new online course that you could take called Stellar Gateways, working with the two particular stellar triangles that are portals. One is a portal of divine destiny, and the other one's a portal of our ancestral lineage. And both of them play a powerful role in, like, for humanity on a whole. But sometimes if we have stars that are personal signs or personal points that are connected there, we can connect into those ourselves as well. So yeah, thank you all. Any other thoughts, Deborah, or anyone else?
No, but thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. I learned so much. And it was interesting because I'm curious. My North Node was on that 4-degree Taurus point. So what would be the difference between an ascendant being on a star and a North Node being on a star?
Well, it would just be the difference of what the North Node means compared to what the ascendant means.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things on the ascendant, and as far as my own like definition of what the ascendant is from what I've learned, is it has it's our soul's emerging identity, which relates to our future and to the sort of the image we're trying to put forth into this world. But then we go to the North Node, that has more specifically to do with our destiny point, so that there is something more karmically related with that particular star, and as it's weaved in with the North Node, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And like, if you have a star that's connected to the moon, then there obviously there's different definitions of what the moon is, but from my shamanic astrology perspective, it's connected to the sort of the deeper realm of our connection to our family of origin, or our past, maybe the emotional attachments that we have with that, the mother, there's, that star could represent a key element into that.
Yeah. I have my moon right there too. So that would all,
yeah.
my
Wow.
ascendant, my moon, and my North Node are all right there in that, right around that 4.
That 4 degrees, what again?
Taurus.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, that is really profound, powerful. Right there at the horns of the ram, and the sort of the head with all the senses there, and that's obviously all that I shared about the other person who had it there is connected to your chart too.
Yes.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything else they would like to ask or share?
I want to say thank you, Eric. This was awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome, Shannon. I'm glad you made it on the call. It's been great working with you. And yeah, I'm hoping to, again, Deborah, I'm hoping to go out to Ohio, and I'll keep you apprised of that. And it'd be fun to go out there and be with you all, and see the total solar eclipse.
Yes. Hopefully you'll come.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I vote second for that. You should definitely go.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, okay, that's helping me a lot. Thank you, actually. The reason I'm a little hesitant or have any kind of hesitation was because I was invited to another place in Texas, but it's typically like I just don't, I don't know. I'd much rather be in I don't want to be in Texas. Anyway, that's a
Well, there you go.
a whole thing there. So
Decision made.
Caitlin Costello is supposed to be there, and there's a couple other people that I know are going to be there. But yeah, I don't know. It's not that I had a bad experience there. I was in Austin a couple years ago, but I don't know. I just I'm not fond of Texas's climate. So the heat and humidity combination is much worse. I've been in Ohio, and it's can be bad there in the summertime, but depending on what part of Ohio you're in. I was in Cincinnati, but yeah, up you're further north towards the lake, so close to the lake. So that feels like I've never been to the Great Lakes, so there's that feels like for my Sagittarian part of me, it feels like another place I can explore.
Yes, yes, you are a seeker. You must come seek in Northeast Ohio.
All right. All right. So I'm instead of 50% there, I'm like over 85% there. Okay. We're getting
All
there.
right.
We're getting there. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Erik. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
we
I thank you all. I appreciate it. And I look forward to making a future presentation here, or I will see you in April.
wonderful, wonderful. All right,
right.
we're gonna close this off. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Now, happy eclipse, everyone, and be
Yes.
well.
Yes.